Welcome, everyone. Nothing, huh? Thank you, Karen. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It was noted American businessman Ray Kroc who said, "When you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you rot." When you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you rot. Now, I take that sentiment to mean seeking continuous improvement. How do you continue to learn, to move forward, to educate yourself? Because once you become complacent, you begin to decline. And by coming here today, to learning from others, to engage, you've taken that first step. And it might be the lights, but it looks like all of you have a slight hint of green today, so well done. On behalf of Boston College and the Carroll School of Management, welcome to the Boston College Chief Executives Club. We're thrilled to have you here today. And again, this sentiment from Ray Kroc, continuous improvement. This concept of we need to ensure that we improve ourselves and those around us. We continue to seek ways to get better. Good can be a challenge to being great. So don't stop continuing to learn and to challenge yourself and to grow, because we do not want you to be ripe. And that goes for an organization as well. How does an organization move itself forward to evolve and to improve itself? And I think we're going to hear a little bit about one company's efforts in doing so as we talk about accelerating the arches later. You'll note that we had an event scheduled in November. Unfortunately, the CEO of Amgen has been called to Washington, D.C. on that date, so we will be rescheduling that at some point in 2025. As such, our next event will be on December 10th, back here at the Wharf Room at our home, the Boston Harbor Hotel, where we will host the Chairman and CEO of Visa, Ryan McInerney, who will be hosted by our very own Joe Preston from New Balance. Thank you, Joe, for the work that's going to go into that. Lila is just recovering from months of work, so we appreciate it. But seriously, on to today's business. We're thrilled that our host today is Lila Snyder, the CEO of Bose Corporation. She assumed that position in 2020 at Bose, following in part from the incredible leadership from Bob Maresca, who's also here. Thank you, Bob, for your time and support of the organization. Lila grew up in the Midwest, attended the University of Miami, the U, am I right? Go Canes. Let's hope that's not being recorded. And got her BS in mechanical engineering. And coming out of undergrad, she didn't know what she wanted to do with her career, so she decided an SM and a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT would be the ticket. When I don't know what I want to do with my career, I sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Thus, she has succeeded tremendously well in her career. She started off after leaving MIT, where she found both a talent and an interest in both technology and problem solving. She started from there. She went to McKinsey, Pitney Bowes, before joining Bose Corporation. Now, our keynote speaker today is Chris Kempczinski. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Who is the chairman and CEO of McDonald's Corporation. He began his career in brand management at Procter & Gamble before moving on to executive positions at Pepsi and Kraft Foods. He went to Duke University as an undergrad and graduate work at Harvard Business School. But to really get a feel in the flavor of Chris and his intellect and his humor, you must follow him on his social media channels. Chris K spends a wonderful time promoting McDonald's. My favorite videos, which I actually got lost in for a couple of hours watching, We're watching him do taste tests of exotic foods from the McDonald's menus from around the world, ranging from the Chicken Big Mac, coming soon, today, to the Ghost Pepper Chicken Sandwich in Canada, and my favorite, the Samurai McSpicy in Thailand. So I strongly encourage you to follow Chris K on his Instagram account. Now, as tribute, I've worked with a chef in the Boston Harbor Hotel. We have some exotic foods coming here for a blind taste test so you can post them. If only we had the time. So without further ado, please welcome Lila and Chris to our stage.
Warren asked me which chair I wanted, and it created some anxiety about the fact that I should know which side is better. So I've chosen this side.
That's why I let you go first.
I know, I appreciate it. I was going to talk about the Chicken Big Mac.
Big day today.
So you did do one of the videos. I have not spent hours on the videos, but I did watch the Chicken Big Mac versus the Big Mac video. So do you want to give everyone your perspective on the Chicken Big Mac versus the Big Mac?
Sure. Well, it works for starters. I was a little skeptical in the beginning. Would a Chicken Big Mac really hold up? But it does. And what I also like about it, different than the Big Mac, is the chicken patties actually have a crust to it. So there's actually a kind of a crunchy bite to it. You still have the Big Mac sauce. You still have the 2 layers. I would recommend not eating it while you're in your car. It's a little messy, but it's really good. And it's here for about a month. We had it in the UK, which is where we first launched this, and we sold out. Franchisees bought a month's worth of supply, and we sold out in 10 days in the UK. So we'll see if we can replicate that here in the US.
Awesome. Okay, so let's stick with this theme. I think one of the questions that everybody might have at the beginning is, what exactly do you do at McDonald's at the corporate level versus the role of the franchisee, and how do you think about how you spend your time between those groups?
Sure. Well, Ray Kroc set up this company with a fantastic business model, which is we are essentially a business that's a global business but run by small business owners. And want to recognize we have a number of our Boston-based franchisees here today, and they are the face of the brand day in and day out. 95% of our 40,000 restaurants around the world are franchised. And we talk about at McDonald's, the business runs on what we describe as a 3-legged stool. And what we mean by that is there's the company, which I represent, there are the franchisees, and then we have our suppliers. The other part of McDonald's is we don't own any manufacturing facilities, we don't own our distribution logistics. All of that's done through franchisees. And the way this business works is it's this orchestration and coordination between all 3 legs of the stool that makes it work. What I sometimes will say, because people are like, okay, that's unsatisfying, be a little more specific about what exactly do you do. Certainly we try to create at the company level the strategy, and we'll do that certainly in consultation with franchisees and our suppliers, but the franchisees have to bring it to life. And anybody who runs a business knows that you can't have strategy completely divorced from the execution. The execution has to inform the strategy. So that's how we end up working, but it's a very collaborative business. It's one where there are healthy disagreements that come up, but our view is for 70 years, it's been sort of that creative tension that we have within the organization that's actually been one of our big strengths.
Awesome. Okay, so McDonald's is so different today than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think if you had gone back in time and said, is this a company that can continue to grow? Many people would have said, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about how a company the size of McDonald's, with the presence that you have globally, continues to find ways to grow.
Yeah. Well, to start with, we do have 40,000 restaurants, but we're still adding about 2,000 to 2,500 restaurants a year. And in China, we're still adding about 1,000 restaurants a year in China. So certainly one source of growth is just continuing to build new restaurants. And we look at take the U.S. for example. We have about 5 restaurants per 100,000 in the U.S. If you were to go to a market that's, we think is pretty developed like Europe, it's only 2.5 per 100,000. So even in a market like Europe, where we've been in Europe for 40, 50 years, we still have opportunities to grow there. And then in the U.S., if you think about where the population has shifted over the last, call it 20, 30 years, we're overdeveloped in the Northeast and the Rust Belt. We haven't built the same sort of presence in the Southwest and the Southeast. So you're constantly right-sizing your portfolio based on sort of where the customers are, where the people are. That's all the new restaurant part of the business. And then the other side is you've got to drive comparable sales. The way that you create wealth at a restaurant level is by getting more people to come in every single year at the restaurant and driving comparable sales. Our industry is about a 2 to 3% grower. And so our view is, we have to be growing comparable sales at least 2 to 3%. Our aspiration is for us to be gaining share. And that's through menu innovation. That's through making sure that we deliver great service. That's through making sure that we have great value. It's all those pieces, the kind of the 4 Ps that, those of us who have gone through business school learn. We're always looking at, making sure that we've got those things right. I think that to your other point about how has the business changed, the business for a long time, 50 years, was basically defined by sort of 2 ways to order. The first way was you would just come in and go to the front counter and you would order that way. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, we invented the drive-through, and that became the second way to order. And what's happened in the last 10 years has just been an explosion around digital. And we saw it first in China. Now 90+% of our transactions in China happen off of a phone. And in the US, that number is approaching 30% in the US. And that opens up a lot of different ways that people can now order, because you can actually get delivery of McDonald's. And for years and years, we thought, well, who wants cold French fries? A lot of people. A lot of people want cold French fries. Last year, we did $16 billion of sales around delivery. And in many of our restaurants, delivery will represent, in the UK, for example, delivery represents about 1/3 of the business in the UK. So that's been a completely new order channel, and digital opens up the ability for us to actually get to know the individual customer. We talked about, for years, we'd put out front billions and billions served, but the dirty little secret is we didn't know who we were serving. We just knew we were served billions, but we didn't know who they were, what they were ordering, why they ordered it, what their price sensitivity. And now that you're able to go on digital, you get to know everything about that customer, where they go, what times of day they go. And so that's allowed us to get a little bit more bespoke with how we provide the experience for the customer. So all those things open up opportunities for us that we wouldn't have contemplated or even thought about 10, 15 years ago.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about technology. So you just talked about a lot of it and how it's getting you closer to the customer. I think we hear every company's becoming a technology company, but you really are becoming a technology company. You've got a massive team who's working on technology. How do you think about those investments, the payoff of those investments in the complicated ecosystem that you have?
Yes, it has been complicated for us because we've evolved from a business where when we talked about technology, and I would go back even 10 years ago, when we talked about technology, we all meant back of the restaurant, basically. Point of sale systems, payroll systems, all those sorts of things. And now, as I described it, we're having to be consumer facing. And so that's required a different sort of technical capability for us. It's a different way of working. Our loyalty program, we have a McDonald's loyalty program. Hopefully all of you have the app. But we have 160 million members in our loyalty program around the world, on our way to 250 million. And because the consumer experience is now so much more digital, it means that our product teams, the consumer-facing teams, have to actually now work with the tech function. And for a long period of time, tech kind of just happened over there, and we didn't really understand it, and they would do the point-of-sale systems and other stuff in the restaurant. But we're having to work much more closely together, and you and I were just comparing notes beforehand. It's not easy always to do. When we talk about technology at McDonald's, we say we have three tech platforms. We have a consumer platform, which is all the stuff on the app and loyalty programs, et cetera. We have a restaurant platform, which is running all the technology that makes our restaurants go. And then we have an enterprise platform, which is HR systems, finance systems, all those sorts of things. And what we've done is we've put business leaders on top of those to define the strategy, to say what the vision for that should be, roadmaps, et cetera. And then we say the tech team, his job is to go put hands on keyboards and make it happen. But back to what I was saying earlier, defining the what and the how, they get blurred. And so in our organization, we're learning, quite honestly, and we're by no means perfected. How do we get the business leaders to now be working much more closely with tech? And it's just critical to get done these days.
Maybe it's a good segue into a culture question and maybe your leadership style and how you think about it. So Chris and I first met, we both took these first CEO jobs in 2020.
Great timing.
Great timing.
Yep.
It was awesome planning on our part. And so we met because of that. And it certainly hasn't been an easy 4 years in terms of the external world and what it has thrown at you and all of us. Talk a little bit about your own leadership style and how that's influenced the culture at McDonald's.
Sure. Yeah, if you think about just through the last, I've been doing this now for 5 years, and in 5 years we've managed the organization through COVID, which certainly was a really challenging period. We had a situation with the Russian invasion of Ukraine where we ended up pulling out of Russia, which was one of our largest markets, took about $1 billion write-off in that situation. We are now dealing with a very complicated situation in the Middle East where we're seeing a lot of boycott activity of our restaurants in the Middle East. And I think in those situations, a big part of what a leader needs to do is just to provide a framework of how you're going to think about making the decisions. And so much of leadership is about working through other people. And to get the most out of other people and to really drive the organization, you've got to be able to push decision making, and you've got to be able to push sort of that day-to-day activity out as much as you can into the field. And so I try to lay out principles on how I want the team to think about a particular situation. I'll take Russia as an example. I said, as we were trying to decide what we should do in Russia in early days, I said, well, there's 5 principles that we're going to apply as we think about this. I said, the first is it legal? So can we operate in the country legally or not? Second is, can we be making money in the country or not? Third is, do we actually have operational control of the business or not? Fourth is, do we think that it is accretive to our brand globally? So just our brand, what happens in one place tends to have an impact on our brand in other places. And then the last is, how does it comport with our values? And I said, so now that's the framework for you to go out team and evaluate whether we should stay in this country or not. And I could talk about the same thing on COVID. But I try to use it that way, and we have as the foundation of our company a set of values. I'm sure all of your organizations have a set of values. Our 5 values are we put our people and customers first, we open our doors to everyone, we do the right thing, we're good neighbors, and we get better together. Those are our 5 values. And so when we had COVID, and sort of we do around COVID, I said, well, the first thing is we put our people and customers first, which means we've got to protect their safety. And if we can't operate our restaurants safely, then we can't open the restaurants. And so we use those values to inform how we're going to go about that. And so I think when a leader can provide a framework on how they're thinking about decision making, it's something that everybody can then pick up, and there's so many things that have to be decided on a day in and day out basis. You just have to figure out how do you replicate yourself and get the team all thinking about things in the same way.
Awesome. In an organization as large as McDonald's, because the franchisees are a part of your family.
Yep.
How do you keep that culture and those values front and center and make sure that decision making is happening around the world, from top to bottom?
Yeah, well, I think culture is one of those things where you get what you put into it. And if you just assume that culture is going to happen, or that culture is just so deeply embedded in a company that you don't need to do anything about it, you're probably not going to be getting the full benefit of it. Because over time, people, it starts to slide on you a little bit, or people they maybe lose track of, they start to use different language, they start to make different interpretations on it, and it can slide on you over time. And so for us, and certainly for me and my leadership style, we talk about it a lot. We talk about what are our values, what is the purpose of our company, what do we stand for? And when I go out in the restaurants, one of the things I always love to see is we have a crew room in the back of the restaurant where the crew will take their breaks. And I would say I have probably about a 90% success rate when I walk into those, where up on the wall at any restaurant around the world will be our 5 values. And all of the teams, when I'm out there meeting with the local teams, they'll talk about how they're using the 5 values to drive employee engagement, make their decisions. And so I think just you've got to talk about it. And if you talk about it, that's sort of just like water on the plant, and it'll just allow culture to grow. And it's ultimately, culture attracts people, but it also protects you in so many ways.
That's awesome. Okay, can we talk about food now?
We can. Chicken Big Mac.
Chicken Big Mac. It's a great example. Okay, so I have so many questions about food, but I'm going to start with just a brand question. I think many of us are responsible for iconic brands. You're a brand guy, but you have iconic brands in your menu items that are bigger than most of our brands, which is kind of amazing. How do you think about those brands, the Big Mac brand or the Egg McMuffin versus the corporate brand? Do you think about those as brands?
We do. In fact, we often will say we have $17 billion brands. So a Big Mac is a brand, McFlurry is a brand, Egg McMuffin is a brand. We have 17 of those that are billion-dollar plus businesses. And then we have the master brand, the umbrella brand, which is McDonald's. And the two of them work in combination. So you'll see, I think anytime we're out there doing a marketing calendar in a year, you'll certainly see us talking about our product brands. You'll hear us talking about there'll be a Big Mac campaign or a Quarter Pounder campaign. But we're also, all of those things need to be making the corporate brand, the umbrella brand, as strong as we'd like it to be. And so figuring out how you do that, but we have a set of guardrails around what we think McDonald's stands for, and then the product brands are all supportive underneath this. And I think generally we get it right. Sometimes we can get a little bit off because marketing is a very decentralized thing, and back to everybody has their own interpretation. But I think in general we've been pretty clear about what we talk about at McDonald's is we create delicious feel-good moments that are easy for everyone. I mean, that's the brand promise of what is McDonald's. And then the brands, the products underneath that have to feed into that global vision of what our brand stands for.
Okay, so who inside of McDonald's invents the next big menu item that will become a brand? Where does that innovation come from at McDonald's for the next food item, menu item that we're all craving?
It comes from anywhere. I think that's one of the things that is great about our system is we've got franchisees who come up with some great ideas. The Big Mac was invented by a franchisee. The Filet-O-Fish was invented by a franchisee. The Egg McMuffin was invented by a franchisee. So there's a great track record of innovation that came from our franchisees. Sometimes suppliers will come to us with an idea for something based on trends that they're seeing. And then there will be times where the corporate team will come up with something. And probably the most recent example of this is we're always doing work to kind of just understand where are there things that we have an opportunity to maybe fill in a gap to what a customer is looking for. So we tend to have a pretty broad menu, so you would think, well, we don't really have many gaps, or you wouldn't think you'd have many gaps. But we did discover that in a lot of our big markets around the world, what we lacked was a large burger, basically, a big satiating burger. And by that, it was consumers who were looking for just something bigger than a quarter pound or bigger than a Big Mac. And typically they'd be going to sometimes fast casual or other places where you'd get these, half-pound burger with all the fixing on it. And so in this instance, we said, well, we've identified this global insight. We're going to actually have the corporate menu team. So we do have a global menu team that's in Chicago. We're going to have them come up with a product which we called Big Arch. And we now have Big Arch in 3 markets, in Portugal, in Germany, and in Canada. And we've piloted it in those 3 markets, and I'm happy to tell you you'll be seeing it in a lot more markets in 2025. So that's another way that innovation can happen. So I think you never know where creativity is going to come from. You don't want to stifle creativity. You don't want it to be like it's their job to come up with the new stuff and everybody else, I don't want to hear about it. You actually want everybody to feel like they can be a source of ideas.
And you're testing and trying things all the time.
We have tried everything. We have had McPizza, McQuesadilla, McSpice, or McSpaghetti. I mean, you can go through any menu item. People, will come up to me all the time and say, "Hey, have you ever tried?" Yes. I don't even know if you finished the sentence. Yes, we've tried it. And then I also get, the question, "Why don't you have this on the menu anymore?" And my answer to all those things is because it didn't sell. Our menu is very Darwinian. If you look at our menu, what's on our menu is because it's what's selling. I get asked all the time, "Why don't you have more salads?" We've had salads on there. They just didn't sell. We did another thing recently where it was about Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat. Should we do a veggie burger? And so we said, well, that's interesting. Let's look at that. And we ran a test in San Francisco and West Texas, thinking we were going to go pick the 2 sort of extremes on where this product could work. We ended up selling more in West Texas than we did in San Francisco. But in West Texas, we were selling on average about 50 of those a week. And to just put it into context, a Big Mac, we'd be selling about 900 a week. So we're always out there trying stuff, but it's got to earn its place on the menu. And if it doesn't perform, it gets yanked.
I love it. I'm sure we all have our favorite international Mick item. And I remember the first time when we first met, one of the stories you told me, which you may or may not remember, this wasn't in the official questions, was about the cafeteria in Chicago. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So can you tell everybody about the cafeteria in the corporate headquarters?
Yeah, well, we have a really interesting concept in our headquarters office. Anybody who comes to Chicago, you can come to the headquarters, and there's a McDonald's on the first floor, and that's our international menu. So we pick the best items, the best-selling items from around the world. And that's the only place in the world where you can come in one location and be able to sample the best of, which is a fun thing for employees, but it's also a fun thing for tourists in the Chicago area. They like to come and kind of get a taste of McDonald's around the world.
Awesome. My last menu question for you is chicken and beef, right? So talk about kind of how the menu is reshaping because we're all eating more chicken and less beef than we did a decade or 2 ago.
Yeah. Well, we sell more chicken than beef globally. So that's kind of the first thing that I think surprises people. The second is chicken is growing about 2 times faster than beef. So chicken is a growth protein around the world, and certainly we want to be participating in that. And then we do think about the fact that chicken today is about, or beef today is about 2.5 times more expensive than chicken on a price per pound basis. So when you're thinking about delivering value, it's easier to deliver value on chicken products than it is on beef products. And as we think even further out, and you think about climate change, and I think at some point there's going to need to be a price on carbon, but the carbon density of beef is about 10 times the carbon density of chicken. And so if you think about further, if the price of beef were to be 10 times the price of chicken and we were over-rotated toward beef, that could really create challenges for our portfolio as well. So certainly we're always going to be a hamburger business. That's always going to be a part of it. But I think What we've discovered is the customer is moving to chicken, and we've got to make sure that we've got some great chicken products as part of that.
So now we all get the chicken Big Mac. See how
Chicken
it's
Big
come
Mac,
full circle.
you did a great job. The weave, as it's been described.
Exactly. If this Bose thing doesn't work out, I have a second career. Okay, let's talk about the consumer.
Yep.
So we were talking about it a little bit beforehand. We're obviously in a strange economic time. How is the McDonald's consumer feeling? What are you seeing in your restaurants in the U.S. and globally?
Sure. It's confusing, I'd say, is probably the one word that I would use. So in 2023, for most of the year, when I was getting on analyst calls, I was predicting a mild recession, and we ended up doing 8% plus comp sales in 2023. And then we came into 2024, and what we saw was things definitely slowed down in Q1. And what really surfaced is that lower income consumer, and we would define that as earning $45K and under, which represents about 25% of our business, they pulled back in a big way. And I think several years of inflation, that consumer just got to be much more price discriminating, and they cut down on restaurant visits. So the restaurant industry with low-income consumers, their traffic was down 10% in Q1. What's been interesting is if you were to go to upper income, and we can geographically code our restaurants as to what income demographic based on zip codes is going into that restaurant, upper income is completely unaffected. Upper income is still growing at a really healthy clip. And I think that's what you see just in the consumer sentiment is depending on where you are and depending on kind of your own financial situation, it can feel like a really challenging economic environment. Certainly you've seen, I think, a one-time big hit to purchasing power when you look at rent, you look at healthcare, you look at insurance. I mean, all those things have gone up pretty dramatically, as well as food. And real incomes among lower income consumers are down. And that probably is down for several years. And so I think we're going to be in this period of time where it's going to take a while for us to sort of readjust as an economy. But it's that upper income that is incredibly resilient. And so people are still spending on trips. People are still spending on experiences. You're seeing that be really healthy. But I think for us, we're starting to talk about 2025, and my message to our teams has been we need to be preparing for another challenging year. We need to be making sure that we've got a really strong value proposition in all of our markets because the consumer is still seeking value. And McDonald's is a business with one of its foundations was on value. And so I think for us, we've got to be pretty strong on that. The one other thing I would just add is in our business, because China is our second largest market, China is basically in recession right now from what we see. And that's another thing that's just, I think going to be interesting for large multinationals is China for many years was a growth industry, was a growth market. We're seeing less of that these days. Now, I think the China government has put in place some things in the recent weeks that hopefully can get that economy growing. But there are certainly pockets around the world where the situation's, I'd say, even more challenged.
Great. Okay, I have a handful of rapid fire questions for Chris, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions, so be ready. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Top selling item at McDonald's?
French fries, of course.
Okay, that was a kind of a layup.
Kind of a layup, yeah.
Okay, what's your favorite core menu item?
So favorite core menu item. We have core, which every restaurant around the world has to have.
It's rapid
and then
fire.
there's non-core. So I'd say quarter pounder is probably my favorite core menu item.
With cheese?
Oh yeah, quarter pounder with cheese. Yeah, always with cheese.
Okay, I was.
Yeah.
I didn't want to assume.
Yeah.
Favorite global menu item?
Favorite global menu item. I don't know. I do really like the McSpicy.
You want to explain what it is?
Just imagine it's a chicken burger, but really spicy with a hot sauce on it.
And it's Thailand?
It's in a number of markets. It started in Thailand,
Okay.
and it's been picked up in a number of other markets around the world.
Okay, so French fries is number one. How many Big Macs does McDonald's sell in a year?
So last year, we were well over a billion Big Macs sold in McDonald's.
It's an amazing number. Okay, what's a book or show you've been watching or reading?
Well, I just finished the season finale of Slow Horses last night, which really good.
Okay, that's a good recommendation.
good.
How many miles do you think you've run this week?
Not that many, actually.
Which is what, though?
I mean, I think I've probably done 15 so far this week. So
Thank you. Thank you for making the rest of us feel bad. What's the one thing you think you need to get better at?
Well, my team would say prioritizing. We have a lot of different things that we're working on, and I continuously get feedback that I need to do a better job of helping us prioritize, which I think is probably fair.
Perfect. Okay. Questions from the audience? Yeah, back in the back. There's probably a mic coming your way, I would guess.
Thank you. You just shattered my dreams of ever seeing a salad back on the menu.
It'll come back, I'm sure, at some point. You just need to buy it.
I will give you my zip code and you can track it. Also, I was very excited this morning to see that McDonald's has an adult Happy Meal in Spain that just debuted. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll see that. But most of all, I'm Joanne Simons from the Northeast Arc, and we support 10,000 people with disabilities. And I just want to thank McDonald's and your franchisees for being one of the first to really to employ people with intellectual disabilities and all kinds of disabilities, and continue to show the path that I hope others will follow.
Thank you for that.
Great. Other questions? Yeah, right here.
I had also heard that McDonald's is one of the leading developers of playgrounds and internal playgrounds, and I wonder if you could speak to that as a part of your business model.
Sure. Yeah, we call them play places, and in a lot of our restaurants, we'll have those. They could either be indoor, they could be outdoor. You've probably seen them as you've driven by a McDonald's. And it's part of, one of the foundations of the company, of the brand, is about being there for families. And so much of our brand is created in the early years where it's kids going with their friends, kids going with their parents, and play places is a part of that. And so, we will let an individual franchisee, as they're thinking about their restaurant, is this a place that would make sense to have a play place? And we have a whole set of different options for them to be able to choose on that. And it's a great thing. It's a fun thing for us to have out there.
Great.
Hi, I'm Tristan, and I'm originally from Germany. And a few years back, you rebranded McDonald's, the golden arc with a red background to the green background. We were supposing about sustainability reasons, but why did you do that, and how has it worked for you? Because it must have cost billions of dollars to do that.
Yeah. Well, that predates me, but as I've been told, in a system like ours that's sort of a decentralized model, somebody came up with that idea, and by the time the headquarters CEO had heard about it and tried to put a stop to it, it was already in like 2,000 restaurants or something like that. So it's one of those things where I think that one got out the door a little quick, and by the time the folks back in Chicago found out about it, it was like, oh, too late.
So we're not going to see that everywhere.
No.
My name is Stephen Johnston. I'm the managing director at this hotel, and I do have a question for you, but before that, if you're interested in developing a creme brulee, have your people speak to my people.
It looked delicious.
Maybe we can do something about that. You've painted a remarkably positive picture of everything that you do, but there have got to be big challenges in your job, and I was wondering what keeps you awake at night.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's lots of different things that go on. It's certainly gotten to be a more complicated world. And I think the geopolitical backdrop has gotten more complicated. I mentioned the situation we had to make in Russia, the decision that we had to make as we worked through the Middle East and some of the challenges there. So geopolitics, I think, has gotten to be something that is gotten more complicated, and companies can end up becoming political footballs in that, and a lot of times soft power gets projected through corporations, which I don't think is particularly useful or helpful. So that's one thing that I do worry about, because they can get away from you quickly, and you can have other people making decisions about your business, which I don't think is a good thing. That's one thing. I think the second thing that we do think about is the regulatory backdrop has gotten a lot more complicated. It's certainly gotten more complicated in Europe. I'll give you one example. In France, the government there made a decision that all of the packaging in the restaurant had to be reusable packaging, meaning that we had to be able to take it, collect it, have dishwashers in all the restaurants, and then be able to reuse the packaging. And we weren't really set up to have dishwashers in all of our restaurants, but we figured out how to do that. But it also had a pretty significant impact. It hit franchisee cash flow to the tune of about $200,000 per restaurant to be able to do that. And that was something that just happened sort of with the stroke of a pen. And so, there are things that are happening around the world where regulatory is coming in and very quickly can change the business. Here in the U.S., we had a situation in California where the governor passed a law that said that any restaurant that had 60 or more locations, the governor would set the minimum wage, which he set at $20, and that there would be a governor-appointed task force that would set work rules, safety rules, all of that for the restaurant industry, but only if you were 60 restaurants or larger. So that was another thing where, how do you navigate through that? And as you can imagine, who got appointed to that advisory council by the governor is probably represents a certain mindset. And so those things are getting more challenging and complicated because they can happen so quickly. That's been something that we've had to navigate. And then I think the last is just making sure that we're keeping up with the consumer. And the world is changing really quickly. Consumer expectations are changing. And I think when you're a company as big and you've been around for as long as we've been around, there is the risk of complacency coming in. And how do we just make sure that we don't get complacent? How do we make sure that we don't just sort of rest on the laurels and say, well, we're McDonald's, and of course we're going to be here 10 years from now or 20 years from now. You don't have a birthright to that. You've got to make sure that you're continuing to listen to the customer. And so just keeping that sort of paranoia in a system like ours, I think, is another challenge I think about.
Great. I think we have time for one more. Warren? Back there.
Hi, my name is Colleen Rebec, and I'm a full-time MBA student at the Carroll School right now. I know there are a few of us students that were lucky enough to be invited here today, and I was just wondering, as we get ready to go out into the corporate world, if you have any advice for us on building our own leadership brands.
Well, I think about when I started my career at P&G, and my first boss there, he asked me, what's going to be the most important brand that you ever manage? And I was at P&G, so I was thinking, I don't know, Tide or Crest or something like that. I forget what I said, Crest or whatever. And he said, no. He said, the most important brand you're ever going to manage is the Chris Kempczinski brand. And I didn't really understand back then what he meant by that, but as I've fast forward now 35, 40 years, I would just say that the world gets to be really small really quickly. And you're 1 or 2 degrees of separation from everybody, especially as you get more experience in your career. And how you've treated people, how you work with people, your leadership style, all that other, it's it's known by everybody, and that reputation gets built over a long period of time. And so what I will say to our interns, because I will relate this story to our interns, particularly the marketing interns, you learn in marketing to be able to define what does your brand stand for. You know, if you're managing the Big Mac brand, or if you're managing Crust or Tide, one of the things you learn is to put down on a piece of paper a set of adjectives or behaviors that describe how your brand operates. And what I encourage is for people early in their career, particularly, write down on a piece of paper, what do you want your brand to stand for? And then just refer back to it over time to just say, how true do you think you've been from what your aspiration of what you wanted to be known and what you stood for? Are you living that day in and day out? Would that be something that people would play back to describe about you? And if they are, then great, you're doing a great job of managing your brand. But I think that would be something, especially as you're beginning out on your career, to just think about what do you want your personal brand to stand for.
Awesome. I think that was an excellent final question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.